This podcast is brought to you by TikTok and by Globe Aware.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's episode of the Arete podcast. We've got a really cool one for you today. I am here with Kimberly Haley-Coleman from the organization Globe Aware, and she is here to tell us about that organization and then just ways that they are helping people all around the world and people right here in the United States broaden their minds, understand other cultures better, and all the things we love here at the Arete podcast. Kim, how are you? Kimberly,
Jake,
sorry.
I am so delighted to be here with you on Arete. I really do appreciate it.
Excellent. Well, let's just get right to the good stuff. So, tell us about Globe Aware. What is it? What do you guys do? And
Right. So, really, the quickest way is we're mini Peace Corps experiences, 1 week service projects with no religious or political affiliation all around the world that people just sign up for whatever country and date they're interested in. And that's what we do. We're really all about having fun and serving alongside local communities as equals on projects that are important to them so that we're making a difference and really connecting to humanity in a way that may be difficult to do in a day-to-day corporate environment.
yeah, that was what really intrigued me about your organization, the volunteer vacation concept. And I gotta say, I love it because I've done a fair amount of traveling in different areas of the world, particularly I had the opportunity to go to, I joke, well, not jokingly, but I refer to it as real Mexico, not
Mhm.
a resort town. So a
Yeah,
lot of Americans don't actually know what real poverty looks like.
sure.
Like, don't get me wrong, you can struggle in
Yep.
this country for sure, but it's a
Oh, right.
different world. It's a totally different world down there. And even though I was there for leisure, I couldn't help but feel compelled. Like, I wish there was some way, something I could do, some way I could help more down here, but I don't come down here. I don't really know anybody here. And I can't really commit to long term, like you mentioned, the Peace Corps. That's a 2 year commitment, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
that's right. Most people just can't,
No.
especially once they've got a mortgage or family or significant other, it's kind of unattainable to imagine that kind of time. And there were a couple of things you said right there that I wanted to comment on. One, yes, for in terms of what we do have a program in Puerto Rico, but we don't see international service as something that supplants or replaces giving back to your community, your hometown, your neighbors. It's for those who have that extra capacity, ability, or time. We definitely think that this starts with service, and serving in your home and community is incredibly important. But the other piece of it that you said, a lot of people might think, well, it's so true and vital that there are just endless needs, of course, here in the United States, in communities and for our families and people here in North America. In the countries where we do most of our service, people who might be living at what is locally considered a middle class level and have no access to running water or electricity or education beyond elementary school or healthcare. And so while we definitely have very real and tangible needs, people might not understand that someone who is feeling like they're living a middle income life in Cambodia, for example, and who has never had running water. So it's interesting just to have that understanding and then appreciation so that when our volunteers serve and they come home, particularly people who are traveling, with children or their families or friends, churches, school groups, they come back and they feel that extra deep gratitude for the things they do have. Every time they turn on that faucet, they have this deeper sense of appreciation for what they have, even if they still have, of course, needs here. Yeah.
Definitely. One of the areas we visited, the vast majority of the time I was in Mexico, we were in a fairly nice area, the city of Morelia for the most part of it. So they have running water. Buildings are a little bit
Sure.
older, and it's different architecture and it's a different style of living. But for a couple days, we did go out into the mountains where there's just no feasible way to get running water.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
not geographic. I mean, it's geographically possible, but it's not the cost benefit
Oh,
analysis on that.
sure.
It doesn't work. But they were showing us, and they were very proud of this. Like you were saying, the people who lived there, at least where we were, for the area, they had a pretty nice house, and they were just showing off a brand new outhouse they had built,
Sure.
and it was very nice. And they had actually, what would you call it, diverted the river that they live next to act
Hmm.
as their plumbing. But then I pointed out, I was like, well, th- doesn't that mean that their waste just goes downriver? And they just went,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
something that, again, as Americans, we take for granted. But
Right.
whoever lives downstream, that could be potentially a bad thing.
Yes, it can. And, cholera still exists in the world. I should point out that our volunteers stay in accommodations that have running water and power and all that. I mean, obviously, medical safety projects, if these are things that drive us and why we've been around for a quarter of a century, is that we have to start first and foremost at safety. And we're not necessarily in the countries with the most extreme need. We are not in Afghanistan or for Somalia, for example. Any place that's war torn is really not appropriate for our volunteers since they are not specifically trained with, we aren't Doctors Without Borders. We're not paramilitary groups. So we expect that people coming in don't speak the language, don't have any specific skills, don't know anything about the culture. So we've got to, so when they go back to their accommodation in the evening, it's often very different from what they're seeing during the day. And yet, if somebody's going with, say, their 8-year-old son and they're pumping water in Ghana to mix concrete on the hygiene stations we're making that first time, they go and they're pumping the water, they might be kind of sloppy and quick about it. And then when they see all the women bathing their babies and boiling the water just to drink it, that next trip back, they're being super careful with the water. And then when they go home, they're turning the sink off between brushing their teeth. And this is something in terms of experiential learning, you don't have to lecture. You're really just seeing it, and you're seeing how in the local communities, these men and women and children have the same fears and hopes they just want to go to sleep with some food in their stomach. And if their kids are able to get an education, it's super grateful for that. So to have that shared connectedness, it's interesting. There are obviously so many churches that do great work in this area. And what we've seen quite frequently is a church will have a long-standing relationship with a community, say in Uganda, for example, where they go back over and over. And so, but they may just go once a year, maybe twice a year. So we're similar in that all of our program locations, we're going every other week throughout the
Oh,
year
wow.
so that we have, continual presence. We're not, and it also means it's sort of plug and play. So when we're building wattle and daub style homes in Kenya, if for some reason the weather hasn't cooperated and we didn't get that final layer of plaster on to cure with our volunteers, well, that very next group will do it, and we're posting it on social media so you can stay connected to see, hey, how's that family doing? It is something that's been nice about technology, is allowing people to stay like they've become family with the communities where we serve, and really appreciate the meaning that goes along with that, they're not just leaving their footprints, they're leaving something, real roots, something that's going to make a difference in someone, and projects that are sustainable because the local communities choose them. They choose how we're going to do it, the materials we do them with. And we've just found that that means whatever we're building, making, creating, fixing, planting, that because the local community wanted it and was a part of it and worked alongside us, they take care of it, and take ownership and leadership of it. And that makes it last. It's really something that we can do at home because you can fix, plant, help your next door neighbor, and hopefully everyone finds ways to do that. Whether it's their church or just their neighborhood associations. And then when people are ready for that extra sense of adventure and getting that mindset of getting to go beyond your regular day-to-day life so that you come back to it and appreciate it even more, this kind of service adventure, that's what it's there for. It's for that moment when people are ready to have a little less traditional consumer mindset for their vacation or their travel. And the reason, ours are all very short, except for our Galapagos program. They're all 6 nights. Because we know if you're a busy working North American, you cannot take, as you said, 2.5 years for the Peace Corps or 6 months to go see. And, frankly, when I started this 25 years ago, one of the main motivations when I was going to try and serve in countries where I was already working, nobody really was set up or prepared to allow me to help unless I was going to be there long term, because they assumed that it would take, someone else off of whatever they were doing to train me and oversee me. And I do understand that. I get it. And it's also part of the reason why, I think a lot of people are surprised because it costs around $1,400 to do one of our programs. And that's, food, accommodations, our project materials, medical insurance, all that. But they'll often wonder why they're having to pay. And we have our local coordinators, the foremen and translators, cooks, drivers, and the communities don't have enough money to cover all of that. And our only source of funds is the volunteers. So it makes it sustainable. It's a tax write-off for the volunteer participating. That's never why anyone does it, but it makes all the pieces fit together.
Yeah, so I had a bunch of questions that you just answered. One of them was going to be, how long were the trips typically? And I read it on the website, but I think a lot of people would be surprised by, because I'll be honest, when I read that, I was like, wow, this seems tailor-made for somebody like me, because I don't, just like you said, I can't commit to a month, 2 month, 3 months,
Right.
6 months, a year. I can't do that. I have too much on my
Um,
plate. I'm far too busy. I could totally do a week. I
yeah.
could
Yeah.
totally do a week. And the pricing, I know it varies, so I don't want anybody to get the wrong
Right.
idea. Like, it varies, but I'm gonna be honest, it's pretty good. Like, for
Yeah.
your typical international vacation by comparison, you're not spending a ton of money here, and you're doing fantastic work. So
Yeah, we
it's
we try and keep it as affordable as possible. I mean, you're not staying at the Ritz-Carlton.
sure.
We're staying in mid-range to low-range accommodations, usually with a flair to where it feels like you are in that country and not just staying at a Motel 6. We try and have some local flavors so that when you go home, you really feel like you got a dose of the culture. And because we know that the local communities, they know the issues and challenges they have. They know how they want to address them. They often don't have the resources, but that means they're usually faster and better at doing whatever project we're doing. And so our volunteers are really learning um, about the culture and about the project. And again, this is the kind of learning that isn't, there's no books and professors and lectures, but that's half of our mission. While we are trying to help people stand on their own 2 feet, we are also hoping that our volunteers are gaining from it, and they do, in terms of understanding the real beauties and real challenges of a place, and not just that postcard view that, as you mentioned, in Mexico, seeing the beaches of Cancun is great, beautiful. Everybody should do that too. More traditional vacation where you're going to churches and museums and getting off and on a bus and with a tourist group. There's room for all of that. This is just a different way of experiencing, using your free time in a different way. And I think it usually shocks people when you go home. So when you go to Peru, everybody wants to see Machu Picchu. When they go to Cambodia, they want to see Angkor Wat. We do all that. You go on our project locations, and we know that people don't want to go this far and not see those things. So we include all of that into our scheduled week. But that is not what people go home remembering. They will show their pictures of Machu Picchu, but it was when they were playing the kids, installing the concrete floors and eating with the local. Those are the things that really, those are the souvenirs that stay with them. and just over time, we've seen the magic that happens. I mean, I have just so many impactful stories, and one that just won't get out of my head is the first time I gave a wheelchair to a landmine victim. They're all usually children that pick up the landmines in Southeast Asia because they're, you know, round and bright and small, and it maims them. Usually, it doesn't kill them. And so these, if it's a young child, 2, 3, 4, they may not have had a lot of visions for their future, even if they've suffered. But when you give that wheelchair and look in the eyes of the parents, because they did have a vision for their children, and I get goosebumps even today when I think about it. Man, that just connects you so quickly, and in a way that no matter what deal or business paperwork I was getting through my corporate life, it was a different kind of uh, satisfaction and meaning level. And so I really say with all sincerity that service is very selfish in that it does so much for the person volunteering.
7 million U.S. businesses rely on TikTok to compete.
Within a week of posting, I had over $25,000 in sales.
I don't have $1 million to put towards marketing and branding. TikTok was the way, and it saved my company.
We had a video do really good this week. Sales were up 29%.
About 80% of my business right now is from TikTok.
Small businesses thrive on TikTok.
TikTok brings in so much foot traffic.
I need TikTok to keep growing. We have so much more work to do.
So the next question is, how did you start this thing? How did it come about? What was the idea that came to you, and what motivated you to do this? Because you've really, I love things when I love win-win-win scenarios. I'm not one of those people that believes everything is a win-lose scenario. I
Right.
think there's the vast majority of situations, if you just think a little bit differently, everybody can win in some measure. So where did this all come from?
Oh, Jake, you're so right. We're totally on the same page on this. And we do see it as win-win-win. And you know, a lot of companies, people will get contribution matching. Their employers will, so that it costs even less, or they'll get volunteer paid time off. So it's great PR for the company. It's great for the volunteer. It's great for the community. It's great for everybody. But I didn't know any of that when I started this. So I had been in a corporate world, totally different international business, in the for-profit world. And because I would be in places like Germany, Japan, Brazil, and I might be there over a weekend, and if I had already seen the sites on prior visits, I didn't really know what to do with my time. I like to be busy and doing something meaningful. And that's when I started looking around, asking, hey, Habitat for Humanity, can I just help out for a couple of days? Or I'd call, you know, whatever nonprofits I could find at the time. And I was really surprised that you just couldn't find that. You couldn't find short term. Churches would do it. So if you knew of a church that happened to be doing something in the country the week you were there, great. But otherwise, it was that lack of ability to find ways to serve in countries where I was already stationed that made me start doing small scale person to person projects. And when I get home and tell people about it, it's back before social media, I was just overwhelmed with how much other people were interested and wanted to do it and would come back with me the next time I went. And I realized that I wasn't the only person who got so much out of this. And so by the year 2003, February 2003, I left all my other work behind and did only this from then on. And so that's really the genesis of it. It wasn't anything concerted. I didn't set out to do that when I started my career. Like so many, I had a really circuitous career path, and landed here and have been doing it ever since. And you know, COVID was hard. You have borders closed, that made for difficult times, but we had the right infrastructure in place, the right people and motivations, so that as soon as things changed, we had people just dying to get back into it. We have a huge percentage of our volunteers that are repeat volunteers that go to a different program each time. I think there's always a little bit of hesitancy the first time, like, gosh, if I've never been to Africa, what am I going to do? How do I know what to eat? All or whatever. And then they go and they realize that, well, that's why we exist. We have things in place so that when you show up, you don't have to know any of that. We do have preparatory materials, and we have orientations and podcasts and YouTube channels, all of that stuff. A lot of times people are even seeing in our social media feeds little video clips of people talking about it. But you don't have to do any of that. Aside from any sort of authorizations to be in a country, like a visa, for example, in Zimbabwe, where you get it on arrival, or any sort of shots and immunizations. Aside from that, we are designed so that you can do this without knowing anything, and showing up. And then after you've done it that first time, it really emboldens you to realize what you can do, and just as substantively that you can actually make a real difference, a measurable difference in a short period of time. And that is, again, something that is transferable back for the rest of your life, that, hey, I don't have to be a brain surgeon to really make a difference for someone. And again, you can do that at home. And what we found is a lot of people, when they've experienced this abroad and somehow being in that new mind space that somehow clicks things on when you come home, all of a sudden now it's on. And you're able to see that all around you, the things you can do to engage and serve. That were there all along, but maybe harder to see because that veil hadn't yet been lifted in this magical service experience that can happen. And this is our coordinators and our communities, and of course our volunteers that make this so magical and special. I certainly don't have the skills I wouldn't be able to tell you without the guidance of our coordinators how to build a wattle and daub style home, or knowing that the concrete is at the correct moisture level so that it will cure correctly, those kinds of things. We really rely on our local communities for all of that. And the biggest difference we usually have is that our volunteers are so used to the high and heavy pace of expected productivity in our culture that when they go to other countries, there's a bit of an adjustment to not force our ways down the throats of our local communities and yet still accomplish as much as we want to set out. So there's a bit of a balance there, and it's our coordinators that really drive that and make that happen in terms of making sure all the materials and projects are. But look, if you're in Costa Rica and it's a rainy season, it starts raining in the afternoon, all the locals are going to stop and have a coffee. And our volunteers are really encouraged to do that too,
Yep. Island time is a real thing.
Yes.
I'm so glad you said that because I've actually been, I'm sure there's a word for it. It's not coming to mind, but certainly we as Americans, I can say, as a lot of us, at least in my circle, we often feel like we want to change the world. But changing the world is a really tall order, and very, very few people have the capacity to do it. But you can totally change your street, your community, your local area. And the thing is, if everyone did that, you will change the world.
That's so true. I
So,
mean, really, yeah, it's one person deciding to do something and doing it that really is the root of all change.
yep, because if I would just say to help people, if you feel like you want to help, just period, but you can't figure out how, other than checking out Global Wear, because I mean, this organization is incredible. I can't say enough good things about it, just in the limited amount that I've learned preparing for this interview. And trust me, I'm going to learn some more. Look at your neighbor, maybe they need something. And a lot of people are, they're very proud. Like, I won't ask for help. It's a fault of mine. I'm working on it. But very few people are going to say, if your neighbor comes over or you come over to your neighbor and you say, hey, do you need some help with this? Very few people are going to say no. And you can make their day. You can completely change, going one day a month to a food pantry is huge for someone,
Right.
but it's an afternoon for you. So
Right.
don't feel like it's not worth it or that you shouldn't do it because it's not enough. I shouldn't say not worth it. It's enough for somebody. For sure, it's
That's right.
enough for somebody.
Well, I was just going to say, I'll never forget. I was 31 when September 11th happened, and it was such a tragic event. It was so awful, and yet everyone who lived through it also remembers those weeks after as this unified time where we all felt like we were looking out for each other. There's a special kindness. And there was something unusual that we experienced, and we certainly didn't. We didn't feel divided as a nation. And when you serve aside people, you don't have to be the exact same people and have all the same beliefs, and yet it does unite you. It brings you something to your heart that's difficult to achieve. And as you said, even if it's something small, fixing someone's step or bringing in neighbor groceries or whatever it is, these things do as much for you as they do for the neighbor. And I think most people have experienced it in some way. But I have to say, when I was growing up, the kind of service that I was doing when I was a kid was pretty run-of-the-mill, Girl Scout related things, service that was required by my school, church and community related drives, things like that were pretty standard. And it wasn't until I was outside of that, my normal environment, that the fire was lit for me.
On your website, it says one of your missions is cultural awareness, and that really struck a chord with me because, especially as Americans, we are just statistically less likely to travel outside of our home country just because of how big it is here. It's not a slight, America,
Right.
but it's statistically true. But from personal experience and the experience of many other people, you will never learn about a people or culture the same way without actually going there. And here's a really good example. So my wife was originally from Venezuela, and she came here fairly recently, so she's still very very much Venezuelan. She was asking like, well, what kind of fruit should I buy for just to have out? And I was like, well, I mean, apples are always good, right? But I live in Indiana. Apples aplenty. Like apples are just normal here. Like when I was a kid, you could literally walk by apple trees and pick them, and they're plentiful. Um, they don't have apples in Venezuela naturally. They import them. It's a luxury item. So there's a lot of people, especially from poorer areas, who have just never had an apple. It's just not part of their diet. Conversely, mangoes are extremely common. I didn't eat my first mango until I was in my mid 20s. And then when I did, I was like, what have I been missing? But to this day, she doesn't care for apples. I
Right.
find that
Sure.
so odd.
One of the things that we like to point out is I mentioned earlier about having an opportunity to really see and understand the real beauties and real challenges of a culture. And, if you were to get a group of our local community members in Guatemala, for example, and ask them what is the most important thing in their lives, and you would ask a group of North Americans, we really think that everybody would have the same answer. They'd all say, my family, my friends, my faith. And if you asked that Guatemalan group in these rural communities where we live, how much time they spend with theirs, it's a lot of time relative to what the typical North American can spend with theirs, which is a real beauty in a lot of the countries and communities where we work that you wouldn't see if you were just visiting, as a tourist and getting off a cruise ship and going and seeing just a quick passing. But they really struggle in most of the communities where we work to have any access to healthcare. And we've seen some really tragic. In the Philippines, we had a child with a terrible blood disease, had no access to healthcare, and they were pretty sure that this child was going to not live very long. And actually, one of our volunteers went with the family and paid $1,000 to cover all the medical care for this family and for the baby to live, and got to see it and experience it. And that was a real a challenge that you might not see as well. In terms of cultural differences, we hope that people aren't just saying, how do people dress differently? How do they talk differently? And the music, the food, all that. But what are the things that may be invisible to just someone who's visiting for a brief period of time, unless they had some specific way of seeing past that? And our coordinators do a pretty good job. We've got a few things we do that are brief but reflective. In the mornings we try and discuss some surprising cultural thing every morning. So for example, in Costa Rica, it might be did you know in Costa Rica, they don't use mailing addresses the way we do? You wouldn't send something to 7149 Brook Grove. It would be 300 meters south of the main church in Cartago, 200 feet south of the soccer fields. It's a paragraph. And you think, well, how could that work? How does it survive? Well, first of all, they don't use as much mail as we do, but they're used to thinking in terms of monuments and just, so anyway, and then the evenings we discuss reflective exercises really, and these are, we tend to have small groups, 10 to 12 people on average, although the weeks that aren't listed are when we have our big groups, our corporate groups, school groups, church groups, and those can be 250. But when in our reflective exercises, we'll ask, what's something, a kindness you witnessed today, or something you realize you're grateful for, so that we're getting those mental juices of gratitude and appreciation going while we're there, because those cultural awareness exercises help you see your own life and your own belief system and your own culture much more clearly than you might otherwise see. I mentioned productivity earlier, but the amount of free time or the amount of time you spend working or with family, or how you cook or how much time you spend cooking. I mean, some of these things are learned, and it's hard to see them as anything other than a default unless you are exposed in these other ways.
So grateful for the opportunity to work with these kids and see these kids just in their day-to-day and be a part of that, and to have a difference in the community.
Because of Globaware, we are able to bring hundreds of people to come to Thailand, here in Chiang-Dao, learn about the community, interact with all the children here, and for that I'm so thankful.
So we're so excited to be out here with Globaware, helping build these schools for the children. We're doing painting, we're laying down new pathways, building new bathrooms, water towers, a new worship center for them. It's just amazing to see the smiles on these kids' faces and the impact that Globaware is having here in Thailand.
So Globaware, it's been an amazing impact trip, being able to see the kids and to just know that the charity work that we're doing is making a huge difference and impact in their lives. Seeing their smiles, there's not much better than that.
These type of service opportunities are amazing. I think everybody needs to be lifted once in a while in their lives, and it's amazing to be God's hand in someone else's life. And thank you, Globaware, for giving us this opportunity.
It's been awesome working with Globaware. I mean, they're doing a lot for these kids. We got a lot of bodies out here putting these schools together, and it's just been great.
It's been awesome working with Globaware. It's great to give back to the kids and everything. It's just been awesome. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see what we're doing here, but what we're doing is amazing. Giving back is just making us feel really, really good about ourselves, and it's awesome.
It's been great here in Chiang Mai in Thailand with Globaware. We've had a lot of good time making the school. We built a wall yesterday. It's just great to be able to give back and help out the kids in the local hill tribe who are so giving. Like I mentioned that I liked someone's hat yesterday, and he just offered it to me. So it's like they're just so giving, and it's just great to give back to people like that.
I love the opportunity that Globaware has given us to work with these children and help them create a safe environment.
Yeah, I have to share this because this was a really, again, it happened in Mexico. This was really transformative for me, and I kind of saw more of a gateway. I don't know necessarily that it would be considered cultural, but I think it is. So in Mexico, it's fairly common to see people selling things, on or around the street. It's not strange at all. But there
Right.
was there was a kid, and it was a particularly hot day, and there was this kid that was selling. It's kind of like popsicles, but with real fruit, like, and they're very, very good. He didn't have a ton, and they were really cheap. So I said, like, I could have given him like $30 and bought the whole thing.
Right.
And then his work day, as it were, would have been over. And I said, and we were with a large group, so I said, I think I'm just going to go over there and clear him out, and then everybody can have like one or two, depending on how it divvies out. And I was told expressly, it's like he won't sell all of them to you. I was like, why would he not do that? And they said, well, because then he won't have any for the other customers. And I'm like, I never even thought about that. I never thought that would be a concern. I just like put it in my mind, be like, hey, great, I've cleared out. I've made my money for the day. Now I can either do more or do other things. But that was a real interesting cultural moment for me. We did end up buying quite
Yeah.
a few, but we left him some, so that he could continue serving his other customers. And I did hear you say in another podcast that all your projects are locally driven. Luckily, you dug into that a little bit, but like, what are some more examples of
Yeah.
projects that you do?
So we install concrete floors in the homes of single moms in Guatemala. I mentioned the assembly of wheelchairs for landmine victims in Cambodia and our homes in Kenya. Every project and every program is different. And some, like in Costa Rica, we have a rotating list of things based on priorities. Like, has there been a big rain? Has somebody lost their home? In South Africa, for example, in the townships, for a lot of reasons, the houses are all connected and they're cooking directly on the open floors with an open fire. And so fires happen a lot. And so we'll be rebuilding homes, and we have community gardens and kitchens. So, it really depends on the location and the local community, what their current biggest needs are, if we are even qualified to do them. Because again, we're not building hospitals and roads and doing open heart surgery and things like that. So it has to fit within our guideline. If it puts our volunteers in real danger, we cannot take on those kinds of projects. And we're also looking for projects that aren't just the repetition of something somebody might do at home, like a beach cleanup or stuffing envelopes for a nonprofit. I mean, then you're not really getting a chance to experience a culture in a meaningful way. So we do have our own set of criteria, but the projects vary a lot. And the main thing that ties them all together is that our volunteers really aren't required to have any special skills to be a part of that.
That is totally awesome. So I've got some fun questions for you.
Yeah, give them to
Some
me.
some of these may be unfair, but I'm going to ask them anyway. What's
Do
what's
it.
been your favorite destination that you've gone to through Global Wear, or any charity vacation that volunteer vacation that you've done?
Over time, these things change, and I tend to be most excited about wherever I'm about to go to or just come back from, or anything that's really new for us. So Bhutan is one of our newer programs, Galapagos, which is incredible. Cuba for people who don't want to go far but experience something totally unlike our own. This is a place where there's very little materially, but everybody's got nothing but time. And so in terms of getting to talk to people and dance and music and enjoy learning and talking, Cuba is just a fascinating place. And I mean, gosh, they've got more doctors per capita. They're so educated, but they have real needs. And politically, it's very complex, both for someone from the United States and from Cuba to come together because of the embargo, which they call the blockade. But anyway, so I get excited about whatever, if I'm about to go someplace or just come back, that's what's on my mind, and that's what I'm thinking about the most. So yeah, I would say some of those. And for somebody who's never been before, Guatemala is such a wonderful place to go because if somebody hasn't traveled a lot, Guatemala is not as big of a culture shock as, for example, if somebody has never gone to Asia, going or to Europe and they go to India kind of for their first time out of the country, that's a really big leap unless you have some kind of cultural heritage or background where you're prepared for it. So places like Costa Rica, Mexico, Guatemala are places that I feel are really good low-hanging fruit for somebody trying to tip their toe in the waters of service, you know.
Yeah, they're tremendous well, I say tremendous places. I know Mexico. I've not yet had the opportunity to travel elsewhere in Central South America, but I want to. But our good friend of the network and has a podcast on the network, Dr. Fantastic, actually lives in Antigua, Guatemala. That's where he
Oh,
lives now.
lovely.
So
Oh, it's beautiful.
he talks about it a lot, and it seems like an awesome place to go.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little, it's got a kind of some Santa Fe flair to it in some way. It's really a beautiful place. I mean, you know, really, we have a glorious planet and a glorious nation. You know, even our cultures here within the United States are something to be proud of. We really have so many things going on. I look at the kinds of things that, you know, in Louisiana, the cuisine that's so specific and special. And you know, it feels so limitless. And so we're lucky that our planet has got so much. And
Our
hopefully we can
planet.
all take
Yeah.
care of each other, not blow each other up. I was giving a speech alongside Rick Steves about a year ago at Auburn, and it was about the nexus of philanthropy and travel. And Rick Steves, not everybody knows who he is, but he's a travel personality who's had all sorts of travel shows on NPR, and he has a whole bunch of books that he's written for budget independent travelers, and he does his own trips, mainly to Europe. And when he first started back in, you know, the late 70s, he was trying to get people from the United States to think past Florida, you know, for their vacations and to look at Europe. And now in the last few years, there are a lot of people willing to go to Europe, and he's trying to convince them to look beyond that, just because it is interesting how much you can change your own thoughts about the world in your own life when you get those confrontations with a new, different, interesting culture. So, and again, so selfishly and serving alongside someone is such a special way to get to do it.
Very true. Yeah. And the world gets so much smaller the more
Yeah.
you travel and you start, especially if you have the opportunity to make friends abroad. I have friends in Mexico. I have friends in Canada. I have a very, very old friend in Indonesia, of all places. He lives there. So that's wild. Didn't even ever I have an open invitation to go to Indonesia anytime I want, but again, time. But
Yeah.
that's the thing. But yeah, our planet, the world is a beautiful place, and the more you travel and experience it, the more you see that. There's a lot of people that think that, you know, there are ugly areas of the world. And I mean, yeah, there's stuff going on at any given time, but generally speaking, it's worthwhile to travel and see places. Are there any stories that really stick out to you? Anything that really impacted you or even was just enjoyable?
So many. And I think, you know, even through the eyes of our volunteers, seeing the kinds of things that they experience, and that example I mentioned earlier, where we had a family see this baby in the Philippines that wasn't likely to live, and they decided to cover the costs. It's with Legacy Power. He knows who it was. The family, the executives that had the company that just really took initiative to save some lives. And you know, at the time, they were like, "Gosh, I something like $1,000," and they couldn't believe they were able to save a life for that. So I have so many examples because when we're doing these projects, you're meeting the people who are the recipients, and so it's those moments where you're getting to hug them and see them and have conversations alongside them and have a meal together that makes you see things differently. You know, I was super privileged that my father came with me on a Zimbabwe game count a couple of years ago. And he's 83. and this was year before last. And we have that in the driest month of the year, which is in October, under a full moon, because then you can see the animals the best at night. And it's in Wangi National Park, which is something like a 50 square mile wildlife park. And so once a year, they take about 300 volunteers and put a few volunteers at each watering hole, whether it's a pond or a river or a lake or whatever, with this thought that animals will come to it at least once during the day. And so you have barriers that you see once an animal crosses, whether it's a lion or a zebra or whatever. And you're there with your game counters, 3 to 5 people, and you're up for 24 hours in a vehicle counting these animals. And the elephants will come up to you, and and you have countless moments where, oh my gosh, this hyena, I can't believe they're doing that. And look at all those giraffes, and look at all of the lions waiting on the elephants. You think that the lions are at the top of the chain, but anybody who's been on a game count will tell you the elephants are really in charge. I mean, all the matriarch elephant has to do is kind of look at the lions, and they all go scattering. And so these things that, I got to do that with my dad. That was so special, that we're sitting there in the morning, and we see the sunrise, and he's got to use the bathroom, and there's, which we do the bush there because it's that 24-hour count. And he starts to get out, and you see the lions and got back in, and this crazy story. How could this happen? And yet, we're coached through everything we're supposed to do and how to do it. And really unusual environments that are these bucket list things that what you're going home with isn't what you had in your head before you go, right? And so moments like that, I've gotten to go with my children on so they're in college now, but getting to see them interact in local communities and see what it's like to operate and manage in a community or country that has so few resources and so many different resources, and yet they're happy, and they're not looking at their phones, and they've got waterfalls and outside time, and they've got real challenges too. So I would say those are some of the most special moments for me.
Sounds awesome. So I've now upped my desired trips to 3 because I was initially sold on the elephants in Thailand. However,
Yeah.
you mentioned the Galapagos, and then you mentioned the game counting in Africa. So
yeah,
now we have a whole new problem to obsess with.
Yes,
I know
right.
you're very busy. You've got things to do and places to be, but I do want to ask one more question, and that is there anything you would like to leave the Arete audience with, knowing full well the links for Global Wear are going to be down in the description, so all the information you could want is going to be down there, but anything you would like to leave us with before we
Yeah,
say goodbye?
so because I think it's just so important to get out there and put yourself out there. And if somebody is interested and wants to know about something, and hey, I have no idea where I want to go or what I want to do, we love to have those conversations, to chat through, even if you don't end up doing something with Globalware, just to talk about, hey, what are you ready for? What are you interested in? Let us help you a little bit figure out where you even want to point your compass, so that you have some idea of those next steps, because we love talking about those things, and we know how transformative that can be. And so when we're able to help people in that way, we love to do, and our YouTube channel show, like if you want to go see some of the moments I talked about on our Zimbabwe game camp, we have that on our YouTube channel, so that you get a sense for what that even might look like, and if you could see yourself there. But we love to interact with people, so reach out to us. Don't hesitate.
Believe me, will do. Like I said, the links are in the description. Kimberly, I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me today. I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot, and I will be exploring quite a bit here. Thank
Well,
you.
Jake, thank you so much for having us. I love what you guys are doing, and the breadth of content, the different things you're willing to take on. So kudos to you, and thank you again for having us.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Arete podcast. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you guys next month for a brand new episode.